everyone, and welcome to podcast number 9. Jan, how are you doing today?
Fantastic. Always looking forward to our podcasts and the conversations that we have here.
Okay, so viewers and listeners, today we're going to get a little bit more honest and vulnerable, if I may, and we're going to talk about fears. So if I can start first, I always have this sort of fears of not knowing enough, right? And I think I've talked to you about it a lot, Jan. So when we do something new, I have this big fear. Oh, I don't know about it. I have to go and research and do go through the whole Google or buy books, right? So I bought that business model Canva book, and I did read a few pages, just that I didn't finish the whole book. And now when I look at the book, it's at my bedstand, and every time I look at it, there's this sort of failure that comes up, like, oh, I failed at myself for not finishing the book. And then when I started the communication roles at Leadapreneur, I started that going more into the direction. I bought the No Rules book, the Netflix one, and I'm like, so that's gonna give me the knowledge I need to sort of do a good role and handle the culture and then the communication part of Leadapreneur. And then I did read a few pages, of course, again a few chapters I think, but I didn't finish it. And again, every time I look at it, I'm like, oh shit, like what a failure. So there's this cycle of fears that keeps going through, and it's stressful. Yes, there will be time where I can sit myself down and be like, it's fine, it's okay. You're learning and whatever it is, but most of the time, because majority of the times you're seeing the same books every time you're passing by, whatever it is. So those fears keep coming up, and those sense of failure keeps coming up. And then the other thing is, when I see someone reading a book, so most of the time it's you, right? You've read a book and you're like, oh, I've read this book. I'm like, oh, this person read this book. Why? How did they read this? What knowledge do they have? What I don't have? How can I get this knowledge? Can I put a pipe through it? So it's just so much of fears around knowledge and not having enough. So what would you say? And I'm pretty sure, I'm really pretty sure that similar to me, there are other people having same fears or something similar. So what would you say about that? Yeah.
Well, not just other people, Hannah, myself included, very much. I think I also battle those demons every day too, to this day. And I think it's an essential part of the human condition is that we are able to feel fear, but often I find it very interesting to sit with fear and ask myself, what am I actually afraid of? Okay, I'll fail. So there'll be shame, there'll be this and that. But I think what's pernicious about fear is that the demons in our mind are much greater than they actually are, right? And so a good thing, one of my favorite examples of fear creation is in the infamous movie Jaws with the shark, right? The movie is about 120 minutes long. Do you know how long you see the shark for? Oh, I think everyone's waiting for the answer. We can't hear it because you're on mute.
I said I heard it from you a couple of times, about 2 to 3 minutes.
Yeah, exactly, right? And so think about it, many people watch that movie, me included, and have been terrified about swimming in the oceans ever since. But for what? For seeing a synthetic shark for 2 minutes, right? It's absurd, right? It's actually absurd. But yet we still feel the fear, right? And we create the fear, we manufacture the fear in our mind. So I think that's the first thing to understand about fear, is that it's an inevitable state of consciousness. And really, it's about using fear first and foremost as a mechanism for self-survival, right? If we are afraid of things, we should listen to the fear and work with the fear. So there's a sort of hierarchy of fear, right? If you are in immediate danger, listen to the fear and act on it. But then there's a sort of the fear of our everyday society, like fear of not knowing enough, not being good enough, right? And I still struggle with that too. And well, I think I struggle less with it in the sense that I accept it as a part of my existence. So I still a conversation that I have, but I become better at accepting it because on the other side of fear is love and embracing and welcoming. And I think a lot of the society that we are living in today, which is so fear-based, is ultimately fear-based because we don't have enough love. And we don't have enough love to embrace ourselves, love to embrace others. And love can mean many, many different things in many, many different ways. But ultimately, I think love is about connection and embracing. About embracing and connecting an other, right? And so if we love ourselves, for example, we are embracing and connecting with ourselves and welcoming what is there without expectations, right? If you love someone, you're not trying to expect them to be something, you're just welcoming them as they are. And that's why it's so powerful. And And really, you can see the true constraint of consciousness itself is what that consciousness can love or not. And I think that's a very, very powerful message, because one of my beliefs in Industry 4.0 is that it's consciousness that controls capability. So your ability as an individual, as a corporation, is not constrained by your money, and it's not constrained by your technology. It's actually constrained by your states of consciousness. And what I'm arguing is that that state of consciousness itself fundamentally depends on how much love you have. Low states of consciousness are low because they have low levels of love. High states of consciousness are high because they have high levels of love. And so consciousness exists in this, in my mind, in this boundary between love and fear, right? By being awake, by being alive, we have things that we are excited about, that we love, that we embrace, and things that we're afraid of and that we move away from. And this is a natural part of existence. And so working with our fears should, I think what Leadapreneur tries to do is create environments where people can learn to encounter their fears, encounter their limiting beliefs, to explore them in a safe way, but yet in a challenging way. I think no one would say that Leadapreneur is easy, right? And those who've been on Leadapreneur probably have a little bit of a chuckle right now, because they're like, yeah, that is true. And the reason I design it that way is I think that's where worthy work is done, and that's where we gain true knowledge, true insight, right? By doing the hard thing, by doing the difficult thing, we learn to encounter our fears and learn to overcome them. And I think that's actually really one of the things that characterizes Leadapreneurs, is that you're still afraid, but you are in mastery, much greater mastery of your fear. You don't let your fear take control of your state of consciousness. You'll feel afraid. You're doing a presentation to your seniors. You're taking a risk on a new kind of project. It's if you're not feeling fear, you should be careful, because that would mean that you're maybe overlooking something. But it's more about making sure that that fear is in a state that is useful for you, that is serving you, and keeping you sharp, alive, and focused. Because my parents are entrepreneurs, and I think they've done very well. And one of the things that they've always said is, the dark side of entrepreneurship is fear and suffering. This is something that employees don't understand. And I don't mean that in a patronizing sense. I just mean that you're not, as an employee, in an environment where you could understand it, because you get a paycheck every month. And as long as you do it as you're told to a certain degree, you're going to keep getting that paycheck. And there's no sense of that fear, true fear, right? Like, literally, where is money going to come from? I have no idea, right? So that's something where, in becoming a leaderpreneur, we have to learn to embrace our fears. And that's why I believe in the leaderpreneur model, because when I've seen corporations take a sort of intrapreneur model, what they really underestimate is the emotional, psychological journey for that employee and their fear. Creating intrapreneurs inside your organization is not a matter of running a hackathon, giving people some cash and saying, go for it, here's some tech. It's an extremely difficult journey. It's full of fear, self-doubt, and many, many hurdles along the way. And that is why there is such a poor success rate, I think, inside organizations, is that we don't provide the psychological and emotional support for humans to go on these entrepreneurial journeys. And that's really what one of the things I think is important about what we do as Leadapreneur, and what we create in the Leadapreneur ecosystem, is providing that support for people and guiding them through it. We talk about the hero's journey, forest of fear, the desert of despair, going out into the digital wonderland. We create these abilities to make sense of our journey and understand that as a leaderpreneur, you're growing as much as you're learning about Industry 4.0, but you're also learning about yourself, because it's really about the development and cultivation of the inner technology and the outer technology, right? Your inner technology is your state of consciousness. Your outer technology is your ability to master the blockchain, AI, whatever other things we want to chuck in there, right? Processes, the organization itself. But to succeed, we must cultivate the inner state as well as become into understanding of the outer state. And that's really, I think, where ultimately where I would loop this back into is we should feel fear. We should feel fear. Feeling the fear tells us that we're doing something worthy, that we're doing something great. But the challenge is to cultivate a state of consciousness where that fear informs us to be better and guides us to be better, rather than overwhelms us and just breaks us, because that's not kind. That's not good.
Some very interesting and powerful things you've said just now, Jan. And one of the few quotes that are written down is, when you love someone, do not expect them to be something. Love them for who they are. right? And exploring your fear in a safe way and not letting your fear take control of your consciousness. So on this note, right, when you talk about not letting fear take control and whatnot, so this reminds me of how Leadapreneur is supporting the people in the company, right? So one thing about Leadapreneur, what I really like is the sort of emotional support insurance we sort of have, right? Like when you said, whenever you guys feel low, reach out for therapy with Sheila, and that's covered by Leadapreneur. I mean, it's not something that it's not health insurance where okay, I've fallen down, I'm going to claim it back for my company or not, but I think in a way it's so much more powerful, because when I did those sessions with Sheila, I felt so much better afterwards. But I mean, from before Sheila came in the company, and it's not just Sheila, right? Like any sort of therapist coming in and supporting an entrepreneur, I've learned so much. I've learned so much about just talking about fears, about talking about your emotions. And Leadapreneur is a company that is really open about talking about emotions, and that has allowed me to grow so much more. I've been able to handle myself so much better at situations, being much more calmer than going and like okay things like that. Yeah. So so yeah, that has been great. So thank you so much for that, taking this opportunity. Thank you a lot. But what advice would you give to companies? Is that giving the emotional support to the employees? Would you recommend them to do it? Is that much more important than other employee benefits?
Well, first of all, I'm really thrilled that it's been really helpful for you, because it's been extremely helpful for me. And so I think the first note here from a personal note is to recognize the legitimacy of asking for help and getting help in a timely manner. And that is really what I expect from our team at Leadapreneur, because that's the foundation of high performance. I want us to be a high performing team. And what's important is to build a conversation around where we're doing well. And if we are finding some things difficult, then let's talk about it and let's get some help for it, so that we can then come back into alignment again and go on with being better. So I think it's very important at a basic belief level, to say, is it okay to talk about emotions? And if someone's feeling very upset, that is a legitimate work conversation. And I personally believe it is. So I think that's the first thing to have as a starting point, is what are the beliefs about what is appropriate or not? And what stands out to me, to just jump the conversation many levels forward, is where we need to really end up is, what does a high-performing human being look like? What framework could we even use to provide a way of conceptualizing what that might be? And those who know me well will know that I often talk about this, but I'm going to do it again, which is to talk about the 7 chakras. And I believe the 7 chakras is one of the most powerful frameworks I have ever been able to discover, because of the way in which it describes a universal human being. And so I think a useful way to think about chakras is intelligences, that there's essentially 7 realms of the self. And we have to move beyond this very, very naive idea that the self is only in the mind, right? That there's a much more complex nature of the self. And that if we wish humans to be at their best in the workplace, right, and in general, then we need to look at the 7 chakras. And these are, first, the root chakra. This is looking at our body. This is looking at our, Maslow's bottom of the pyramid, right? So your physical needs and all this. So are people feeling happy and healthy in their bodies? Are they feeling like they're getting paid enough, right? These are all foundational aspects. Then in the sacral chakra, there is about, we can call it sort of divine sexuality, but the ability of creative life force. But I think ultimately what it's an expression of in the work environment is that people want to create meaningful work. We don't just want to turn up to an environment where we're just hitting Excel keys and it doesn't mean anything. Now, that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with hitting Excel keys, but it just means that there needs to be a purpose to it, something that you are creating, as the philosopher Hanaa Arendt called it, homo faber, that you are a creator. You're not just a laboring animal in an Excel sweatshop, right? So the second aspect that the chakras guide us to is, one, we have to have a healthy environment for our bodies and for our physical needs and well-being, right? Financial security. We need an environment to express our creativity in a meaningful way. The third chakra is our emotional chakra, which is in between the belly button and the heart. And that's really about being able to recognize that emotions are a whole landscape. The way I think about emotions is they give color to reality. They are the vibratings themselves. And so it's about inviting people to have honest conversations about their feelings. It's often there's a sense of, hi, how are you? I'm okay, good. Yeah, how are you? Yeah, good. Okay, cool. there's no real depth, there's no real self coming forth. So the authentic expression of our emotional state is really, I think, characteristic of high-performing teams. Now, that doesn't mean equally that you're just spraying your emotions around. It's about having very high levels of emotional intelligence. And Daniel Goleman and many others have done some fantastic work on exploring that, and really encourage people to have a look at his books. But ultimately, the point is that a highly functioning human has emotional mastery, has emotional intelligence. And these are foundational. This is not a sort of, oh yeah, it'd be really nice if I had some emotional intelligence. It's, you cannot be an effective leader in Industry 4.0 without emotional intelligence. End of conversation. There's nothing else to discuss about it. So you need to get this sorted. The fourth chakra is the heart chakra. And I think in the language of the corporation, the role of the heart chakra is to look at relationships. So we're not looking at emotions, we're looking at relationships. What are your connections with other people? How are you cultivating those relationships? I see it as a web wave from the heart connecting to other people's hearts, right? And what's also important there is the nurturing of those relationships, and to realize you live in a relationship ecosystem yourself. And so being able to authentically express your heart's true desire to be yourself, basically, in plain English, is very important. So this sort of maybe more of an Industry 3.0 idea eventually arrived at this idea you're this sort of mask-wearing corporate slave who goes to this office to labor away in some cubicle at an office for things that you know, why, right? There's this famous quote from Fight Club, right? We work jobs that we hate to buy things that we don't need to impress people we don't care about. What is that all about, right? And I think that's where you're not going to get high-performing human beings with that kind of working conditions, basically. So if you want innovation, if you want solutions, you're going to need an environment where people can express their heart truth. Now, figuring that out and what that is a whole, it's a lifetime journey, maybe many lifetimes, but it's an important one to start. So there, we've got four there. We've got the root, we've got the sacral, we've got the emotional, we've got the heart chakra. Then the fifth one would be the throat chakra. And this one is easily overlooked because, oh, it's just the throat, it's just communication, but it's really the expression of the self into the world. Do you feel that you can share your ideas? Do you feel that you're listened to? Are you able to, as a very simple point, stand in front of your seniors and do a good presentation, right? That is throat chakra in action. But not just deliver the presentation, but are you able to persuade people to come to your worldview, right? Are you listened to? And so creating an environment where people can really share what they feel and think is extremely important, because sometimes maybe it's the quietest person in the room who has a great idea. But if no one's listening to her, the idea gets overlooked because we're focusing on the most highly paid person in the room, and then we're not able to be effective. So one of the things that's always important to me at Leadapreneur in particular around this is inviting people to share and really listen, and create an environment where people are safe to share. And if they don't have anything to share, that's fine too. It's not about forcing people to share, but it's this sort of ability to express what you see and what you think when you see and think it. One interesting element about the throat chakra sharing is that often people will share things in a way that you don't expect, right? So when I work with different members of the team, one of the things I've been learning is everyone says things in their own way, in their own language. So it's not, sometimes people will say, and this happens to everyone, right? People will say things and I don't quite understand it, but I don't react to it straight away. It takes some time to process, think, and take on board. What are they expressing? Right? What's the tone of voice? What's the emotion behind this person? What's maybe their intention, right? There's a rich communication environment here. So then the last two chakras are then the third eye, right? Which could be characterized sort of as the mind, but I think more the imagination is how I choose to interpret it. And I think that's really about being able to envision a future. And that's a key element of being a leaderpreneur, is you know what your better world looks like and you're part of the organization, so you go and build it. The seniors don't know everything. They really don't. And so that we need to create this collective imagining. It's not this idea that the CEO has a vision and then he's going to cascade it down, right? And then everyone just mindlessly follows this. That's absurd. It's not how it works. And so I think to engage people to be imaginative, to imagine better futures is an essential part of inviting them to be a part of the future of that organization. What's the point of not being able to think of things and imagine the future and get on with doing them if you always have to follow someone else? You're going to be disengaged and not care, right? And then finally, the spiritual chakra, which sits just above just outside the head, supposedly. I kind of think of it as the universal umbilical cord connecting to the greater meaning of it all. And what I think that can do for us in plain English is to invite us to realize that there should be meaning and purpose in our work. I think one of the key transitions from 3.0 to 4.0 realities. 3.0 reality was this conversation about work-life balance, right? What's my work life? What's my work reality? What's my life reality? And these are two worlds, and they're always in competition somewhere, and there's always a tension between it. I think in industry 4.0, my life is my work. It's integrated. It's not like I have work and then I have play. Sometimes I play at work and sometimes I work in other things of life. Like it's a much more integrated mix. And so creating an environment where people feel a true sense of meaning of and purpose in their work. I'm not saying it has to be spiritual in the sense of connecting to a religion. I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is that it's about helping people find a deeper meaning in their work, a deeper purpose. For us at Leadapreneur, I think one of the things that stands out is we all care about elevating consciousness. We care about helping people to grow. We care about engaging them. That gives us all a passion and a meaning in our work. And it doesn't mean that we have to do that for 5,000 people. It just means we can start with one person and it goes from there. So it's about avoid. I think one of the traps there is to be caught up in the hyperbolic that we have to go change the world. Don't change the world. Focus on building your better world, and that's enough. And if that's just with yourself or just one person and that's meaningful for you, then that's already a good thing. But what matters is it's authentic and real and true. So in summary there, I think building organizations where people can be at their best a good way to think about it is aligning the 7 chakras. And the reason why I think that's so helpful as a framework is because often what we do is we focus only on one of them. So for example, pay, right? Making sure people are paid well. It's very important. It's foundational. And that for me would be around the root chakra. But just because people are being very well paid, if they're not engaged creatively, if they don't feel a sense of purpose, if they don't feel healthy in their emotions and their heart, you're not going to get great work and they're not going to do well, right? So I think that's why I love this framework so much. It's a very powerful way of looking at really the 7 key areas of human being. And by bringing those 7 areas into the conversation, allowing humans in the organization to express around them, I think we're able to really build great humans, great cultures, great teams, and do fantastic work. And that's really, I think, where the future of work lies, is creating those kind of environments. And ultimately, they have to be authentic. You can't bullshit a sense of purpose. You either feel it or you don't. And so that's the interesting challenge, to bring truth into the organization and keep it real.
That's really some helpful insights there, Jan. So in summary, what we've talked about so far is we talked about our fears. How do we embrace our fears? Then how do we unlock high performance? And Jan gave a very good deep insights on aligning your 7 chakras, and that can help you unlock high performance. So thank you so much for this podcast, Jan. And since we did 3 back to back, and you're going to take a flight now, so have a safe flight, and we shall see you soon.
Great. It's been really fun, Hanaa. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the Leadapreneurs YouTube channel to get your weekly updates.